Okay, so welcome everybody. Welcome to the first of hopefully many opening acts in Europe for First Change before VMworld, before we get started here. So we're obviously recording this so people can take a look at it later. But the first of the two panels we've had topic are where are our careers going? So really that's kind of a conversation between us amongst different things, whether it's tech, whether it's things you need for training, things you need for just smart career moves, whether it's business, financial, whether it's something that a specific training class, whatever it is. So, but before we get going, maybe we'll do some intros so people know who the heck it is that's talking. So, for starters, I'm Mike Letchin. I am Director of Technical Advocacy for Cohesity. I'm M. Letchin on the Twitterverse and every place else on social, I think. So,
Amit Panchal. I'm a VMware Technology Lead at Dell Technologies, working out the UK, and my Twitter handle is Amit Panchal76.
you expect them to know how to spell
No.
76?
As soon as they put AM, it'll come up.
No, there's not that many. You're fine.
Yeah.
Look for AM something.
You
can figure it out. Alistair?
I'm Alistair Cook. I think I get the longest travel to be here because I live almost exactly on the opposite side of the planet to Barcelona. I write about and teach people about various data center infrastructure and other related technologies, and I'm here as part of the Brown Bag crew making much more here during the VMworld conference.
Awesome. Thomas Bryant. I'm part of the cloud management business unit within VMware. My main focus actually is competitive intelligence of all things, but I do a lot of product marketing, and I'm based out of the US.
All right. My name is Marco Broeker. I'm the product manager of digital workspace at Basefarm in Norway.
So, and you just went over to Basefarm recently. So this is a good one, kind of one, as we're looking at what things to grow your career. We'll start with you. What did you do that you think was the biggest jump to take you to this new job?
I did consultancy for 17 years, and I think that
You were right behind the camera. You switched to one of the seats so guys can switch.
I basically made a move from being a full-time consultant to being a product manager, and being not billable was one of my wishes to continue my career.
So doing product management, there's a different skill set than what you had to have for the consultancy side. Obviously, the consultancy, you were a lot of hands-on day-to-day fixing things, right?
Exactly.
So how did you make that shift? Did you take some trainings? Was there something that somebody you talked to, something you went through? Is it just something that ended up falling into place for you?
I think it falls into place for me. I started a desktop as a service company probably 6 years ago, and we kind of went into this product that we created as a desktop as a service company, and I think I learned a lot through that whole period of time, starting a company, creating this desktop as a service environment as an architect, and also getting the product up and running was a big learning curve. And that's something that I'm currently continuing in the new job, but a little bit bigger.
Right.
And yeah, that's
So Thomas, with competitive, you have to be trying to figure out who you're going up against and what are some tips, what are some things that you do to try to make sure that you're seeing the full scope and seeing the forest for the trees, as they say.
I mean, a lot of it's just talking to people, right? I mean, I'm one person, and there's salespeople, there's marketing people, there's engineers. They all have a different perspective of things. So a lot of the way that I look at like competitive intelligence for what I do is really understanding, what everyone sees, because everyone's perspective is a little different, and every region too, right? Who we run into in competitors in the US is very different than EMEA or APJ. So a lot of times it's just brokering those conversations, and then brokering the conversations not with just me, but between, say, sales and sales engineers and our developers, so they can understand what the use cases are that customers are really driving to, or why they might be going with a particular competitor versus us, or hey, there's a gap in the market that maybe we should consider filling, those sorts of things.
So is that more talking to people already in your network, or how do you tend to think a lot of things for a lot of us along the way? Our network has been a lot of the reasons we've built our career.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is the folks that are within my immediate network, but a lot of it too is the social media aspect as well. I mean, everyone has a voice on the internet, good or bad, and so
mostly bad.
Mostly bad. But I do a lot of market research in that way. I mean, there's the Gartners and the Forresters and all those different and IBCs of the world. But honestly, it's getting a pulse of what people are talking
You can't
about.
say their name; we have to pay them now.
Oh. But I spend a lot of time on Twitter, on other social media channels, just to understand what are they seeing. There's a lot of analytics on it because somebody can also have a loud voice, but they might be a very loud voice and have no market share, and nobody's really talking about them other than themselves and their.
So they're talking a lot, but they're not actually hurting you revenue-wise.
Yeah, exactly.
So guys, if there's questions out there too, please pipe up. So obviously, also you're going into your training side of things. I think that hits on both of those a little bit. How do you look at what technologies are good to train people in, or what have you found has helped the people you have trained move their careers forward?
So two separate perspectives. One is what I do as a day job, actually teaching training courses, and I transitioned from teaching VMware training courses as that became very mainstream. I had to transition on to something else because I'm the opposite to Martha in that I'm all about being billable.
Make sure you're not blocking the camera.
So being ahead and being in front of the technologies that people are adopting in the future is really important for me as a trainer. But then as part of the Big Brown Bag, Big Brown Bag is a location for gaining free community education. It's all driven from the ground up by the people who are producing the content as well. So a typical example would be a recent series we did on Python for infrastructure professionals, so learning to write something in Python. Was Chris Williams said to me, I want to learn how to write Python because I know this is a skill I need for my career development. And by the end of that conversation, he already was thinking of 5 people he was shoulder tap to present sessions for Big Brown Bag. So it's interesting, comes back to that network, listening to people around you and discussing how they think the jobs are going to change, because nobody knows for sure what's going to be great in 3 to 5 years' time. It's very much discuss with your peers, and then there's a very big piece of individual fit. Not every piece of technology is going to fit well with every person, and so you're better off adopting something you can get excited about than something that's necessarily just got a lot of hype. Kubernetes has a lot of hype at the moment. It's not necessarily the right product to upskill, and if it's not going to make you happy, it's not something you enjoy working with.
So I want to get into kind of the individual tech pieces that we think. So before we get there, obviously you work for a much larger company. I mean, Base Firm not that big. You're just saying.
Yeah, we kind of work together.
Yeah, kind of.
So what would you think? What have you seen in a large company?
Yeah.
How do you move your career forward? I mean, a lot of times you go in and you can get stuck in that one spot, especially in a big company where you're pigeonholed into something. How do you kind of broaden that scope to make sure you're moving ahead where you want to go?
So it's for me, it's all about brand. It always has been before I'd stepped into any medium, small, or large company. So building that internally as well as
Twitter
externally.
handle this long?
Yeah, you can't do that internally, right? So there's different nuances on building brands internally and externally, and I'm very much about if you don't want to be number 3001 of 170,000, you have to build that brand. So it's about getting to know people, as Thomas said, getting to know other people in other BUs, other departments, but also being that kind of spearhead, that evangelist about what you're passionate about, right? Because people remember you for what you're passionate about, what you present on, what you have a meeting about, one-to-one meeting. That feedback then rolls through an organization. And that's the way you can make inroads into places you never thought were open before.
So I think you often then get you're the person for that. And I think, Mark, I'm going to ask you this one because I know a lot of people have, over the years, you said you started desktop as a service company. People looked at you as, okay, you're a desktop guy.
Yeah.
How do you get beyond, if you're in one of those type roles, and maybe you don't want to keep being the desktop guy, what would you tell people? How do you get out of only being that when you've built your brand around being that?
Mm-hmm. Just do it. It's your own brand, it's your own career. It's just, if you think you need to follow a certain path, just do it. And there is no reason not to.
One of the approaches is if you're in a smaller organization, you train up a replacement.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You make somebody
having
else
somebody else
that
be able to
guy.
do what you can do is not a bad thing.
Larger organizations, I think, works kind of differently because it is very much about reputational rather than fulfilling a single niche role.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it's you know, I think to your point, it's building brand, good or bad. Sometimes, you know, getting your name out there and not being afraid to put yourself out there is a big part of it. And that's, I mean, I don't think I've had a job in the last 20 years that role wasn't created for me in a way. Like, it wasn't a job rec that I went after. It was knowing people and having a community of friends and coworkers and colleagues that I could talk to, and we built up, you know, a relationship. And then, hey, there's a need, and I think what you bring to the table would fill that. Let's make a role for you.
So with that being said, in the last 10 years, have any of you gotten a position by going to Monster or Indeed or Jobs.com or whatever, or has it been through just what you built in your career?
It's always been through the people you know.
Yeah.
And what you said, right? If the people value you for you, and they know what you can do, they will create a role for you. Okay. Yeah.
So is that different in tech, you think, than in other industries?
I wouldn't take it for granted, though, those sites necessarily either, right? I mean, I think back to when I started my career, and I absolutely started on Monster and Dice and all of those others. I mean, you have to start somewhere because you have no brand.
I think all these websites still exist.
I'm sure they do. But I mean, you have to start somewhere, right? And then it's a matter of, again, finding what you're passionate about. I mean, and it's sometimes it's work related, sometimes it's not. I mean, a lot of people internally know me because I do a lot with soccer and football. I love 3D printing, and then there's all this other work stuff that I do too, right? So having that group of common interests helps build your brand too. It's not just all about work all the time.
I'd say that the external, as Thomas just alluded to, the external side, you know, hobbies, interests, that's...
Pause.
Okay.
It's okay.
This
We'll just put this out of the recording. So we're just going to mumble for a few minutes while we wait for the...
Is this from the...
Who knew? You guys didn't know you were coming for dinner and a show.
Yeah.
synchronized dance we practiced then.
Yeah.
Okay, I think, we're good?
Just as long as we don't have to get the fans out.
Yeah.
And here we go. Take two.
Yeah. So,
Here we go. Go ahead.
No, so I was just saying, so some of your interests, hobbies, they rub off on people inside your company as well as outside. That sometimes helps you to build those relationships, there's rapport, it just opens avenues that if you just focus on tech, you're just known as the tech guy. But you need to be known as, like a more of a rounded person, business and tech.
Yeah, I don't think Thomas and I had a conversation about tech outside of work in 5 years at least.
Yeah,
All right. We both know each other what we do tech, but that's not where we built our relationship around on it. So going into the tech though, let's talk actual kind of product for a minute. What are each of you kind of pick one, and you can't say what the one before you said. How about that? Make it a little bit harder. What's the one tech, if you were an admin and engineer, kind of a hands-on guy right now, that you would say this is what you need to go be looking at to make sure that you can either maintain your role or grow your role in the next 5 years?
So for me, it's back to programming. I'm not going to pick I could pick a particular, I'm not going to pick Python, we've had that, but any sort of programmatic PowerShell, API handling, because the world's moving towards automation, right? We're all about this human-machine partnership thing. It's like everywhere in the press, it's marketed heavily. That's where the world's going. So the quicker you can automate something, the more powerful you become.
Go up, Al.
So I'm trying to work out whether I can swing an infrastructure as code on the same automation. So one of the things
Anybody get bingo there?
But one of the things I definitely see is there is a transition of what we need to deliver to business units to being really consistent and repeatable across multiple environments. And in order for the DevOps stuff to happen, we as the infrastructure people need to be doing what I call ops dev. and learning to automate the provisioning of the infrastructure and make a consistent platform and deliver that consistent platform up to whatever the consumption is. Because that's the way you compete against these consistent services that are delivered by cloud providers.
So before I let you two answer though, on both of those, do you think that is regardless of the size of your company, going back to size? A lot of large companies want a lot of automation. If you're a small company, is it just as important?
Yes, I think it's important in both because you as an individual, it's good to get the grounding, right? Because it's part of your brand and CV or whatever it is, resume. So you get those I call them life skills as part of your career. That boosts you to another place in the next 3 to 5 years. So yes.
Yeah, and from the perspective of my career, it doesn't matter where I am. However, in terms of what opportunities I'm going to get, a small company is not going to see the return on investment by spending a lot of time automating the same things that are being automated in the enterprise company. Because at a small organization, you need to get across a whole broad swathe of technologies, nearly as deep as the specialists working at the large organizations who specialize in a narrow space. So the reality is that in smaller organizations, you're going to get less opportunity to automate things because you've got so many more things to do.
So you guys can answer that one or go with the tech, I don't care.
I mean, you took both of the ones that I was going to take. So, I mean, automation and programming are probably the biggest ones. But honestly, if I weren't to choose those, the ones that I got the most value out of early in my career was actually going back to college and taking public speaking. Like being able to speak to people and not just be tech. That alone, forget tech, forget any skill you have, those interpersonal skills and those relationships that people establish, that is the biggest driver in your career change, honestly, more than technology, is being able to just talk to people, relate to them, whether you're in sales and you're trying to understand what motivates someone to make a purchase and those sorts of things, or technology drivers, whatever it is. I find that the interpersonal skills, the more you can work on those, the better you're going to be long term.
And that's what transitions you from finding a job on Monster
to
having a colleague who you've worked with tangentially creating a role for you because they want you on the team.
Exactly.
Is that ability to communicate and work with people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have anything to add.
So I'll shift it a little then. So going back to my next question was going to be around how much does the EQ and the kind of the people skill side of it really matter for tech roles? I think historically people look at tech people as not exactly the most socially open people.
I'm an introvert. I talking to people emotionally, physically drains me. But you have to get yourself out of that comfort zone. Sorry to totally jump on your question. But you have to get out of your comfort zone no matter what you do, whether you're in tech or marketing or sales or whatever you know. I did R&D for a number of years where I never talked to a soul other than through email or through Skype. You have to put yourself out there and try to learn a new skill. But I think it matters far more than any technology because that transcends, technologies come and go. Kubernetes is going to be here and be gone. Clouds are going to come and go. I mean, mainframe came, went, came back, kind of still here. I mean, everything comes and goes in these weird cycles, but your relationships will last you your entire life. Hopefully.
Yeah. Did anyone get that greeting card? Jobs come and go, your relationship.
Yeah, we're from work. But the reality is getting beyond the really basic jobs. We all work with engineers who need to be kept away from normal people. And they can be extremely good. They can learn new technologies. It's not that they're just siloed in being the mainframe dinosaur.
It doesn't mean that your career can't progress just because that's where you want to be.
But it's going to progress in a particular direction rather than that.
So was that
just
It was a fake question.
So we know then that, do you have anything to add on that one before I jump off of it? Now that we're on more the people skill side, how did that matter for you? Obviously, consultancy, you were always looking. You had the relationship.
I totally agree with the social aspect of the skill set. You know, it's extremely important to be able to present to customers, to be able to be more than a tech guy.
So how about that? I'll throw out kind of individual kind of buzzword terms, and then each of you kind of tell us what do you think about what people should go with them. Okay. So we've thrown a few of them out already. So I'll start with some of the ones you said.
Yeah.
Your list: cloud, What do they need? If I just say cloud, what does that mean to an admin, an engineer at this point? Not into management, just somebody that's hands-on every day. What should they do to make sure that somebody asks them, are you prepared? Are you ready for X technology? What should you do? So cloud.
I work at a service provider, right? So we see lots of things changing in the world where we, as a company, transform more into a multi-cloud provider where our engineers suddenly became cloud admins, where they, we host our own stuff, but companies also come to us. We want to make you responsible for our multi-cloud world, and that's the big change that I currently see.
You're training people often, or talking to them also. So what about cloud? What should they do?
So one of the things is don't fear the cloud. Irrespective of whether you fear it or not, it is coming to be part of the IT landscape. Second thing is that a lot of the skills that you have on premises in your existing environments that you're building and operating are directly translatable into operations in public cloud. So I teach the architecture on AWS course at the end of a 2-hour session. This is how the fundamentals of AWS networking works. Half the students say, yep, I need to get the networks team involved when I start designing something up. Right? It's the same thing you'd have to do if you're building these things on premises.
Okay. Containers.
So I'd say containers, like that's another big buzzword right now.
That was the point of it.
I know. But it's like cloud, right? Year on year, containers, are the answer to everything. But we all know in reality is tech first.
VDI was the answer to everything.
And it still is, right? Yeah. But containers to me just means about right workload for right use case, right? Just matching up where is this needed? Where do I need agility, right? Where do I need to deliver back to the business? And then is that particular area, containers, applicable to it? And if it is, okay, do I need to go and learn Docker? Do I need to go and learn, an orchestration framework on top of it? So you pivot yourself to what your business wants or what they're demanding, what your end users are demanding, whether it's customers or internal stuff.
Spot on. I mean, it's all about use case, right? It's what do you need to do with it. We're not going to refactor an app just to refactor it. You still have a crappy app that now is crappy in containers.
Does anyone have crappy apps in their enterprise?
No, they're all.
No, we have one.
Let's admit it. I believe.
But it's all about understanding what the real driver of the use case is, right? So to your point, is it agility? Is it scalability? What are you trying to drive by moving to containers? I always joke about like CIOs come back from golf and they're telling their engineers, hey, we're gonna move to the cloud, figure out what it's gonna take to move to the cloud, and because somebody else did it or we read it in the magazine. What are you driving towards, right? It's okay to push back and say, hey, what is it that you're trying to accomplish with this? Because if you're just doing it to do it, you're gonna fail. I mean, containers don't solve everything. They solve a specific set of criteria or use cases. Use them for what they're good at, just like, you would use with anything. You're not going to use a hammer, when you need a screwdriver. So use the things that make sense at the time.
So does it matter, should someone who's hands-on technical be looking at the financial implications of some of this stuff? You get pushed, CIO comes in and says, hey, move to the cloud. Does it make sense to be spending more time learning that the financial side of the deal? Like, no, that doesn't. I have this on-prem, it's costing us this much. I put it in the cloud, it's going to cost me 8 times the price. Is this something that you think is the responsibility of a hands-on technical person at this stage?
I think that person should be a stakeholder in that decision making. If you shut yourself out of that loop, out of that conversation, all you're doing is narrowing your focus back to tech again, right? So if you've got a voice to say, oh yeah, I've used this cost calculator, or I've used this, free one, this spreadsheet that someone developed. So you have a voice. If someone disregards it, fine. But you've done your kind of due diligence there, and you did input something that makes you more than a tech.
But stick to your strengths. If you have no idea how to work out what the cost is going to be for deploying a new piece of technology, you have no authority to push back.
And know what you don't know.
Yeah, know the boundaries of your knowledge, the same as anywhere else. Finance is really essentially a technical field. It's bits of numbers and some rules around how they fit together. If you don't understand the rules and the numbers, then just stay quiet, the same as you would if you didn't understand how containers work.
But worth going and checking out, right? If you don't understand it, you need to, because at the end of the day, why are you moving? You're not going to save money by moving to the cloud. Most organizations do not save any money. Amazon is in business and doing really well for a reason. Same with Microsoft and IBM and everybody else. So you need to understand what the driver is. Is it agility? Is it there's some services that we just can't do when we're on-prem? But if you don't understand the financial side, go and find out, because you are competing with those services, whether it's the developer in your organization that's just going out to Amazon and swiping the card, or the CIO who's coming. So being able to understand and have an intelligent conversation, and saying I don't know is okay, but find out what it is, right? What are the costs? What does it cost us to run our infrastructure? And now you can bring that back to the organization. And again, this builds your brand to say, this is what it costs us to run these things on-prem. If we move to cloud, now you're seen as the leader in that, as opposed to, well, I don't know, and you just kind of forget it and go back to what you're doing.
So one final question before we wrap this panel up to get on to the next panel that we've got today. So if you had to tell an admin or an engineer today, the one thing they should go do in the next 6 months that will make a difference for them in 3 years, what would it be? Something they should go do now.
Interesting question.
Wow, I didn't think it was that hard of a question.
Well, yeah, where are we starting from? Because it is always what skills you're starting from, what are the gaps, and where can you get to?
So is your answer go assess what you do and don't know first? That's what they should do now?
Maybe it's worth
Well,
having
not that
those
hard of a
skills.
question.
That's the technical answer. It depends.
Yeah. So if my first answer was go do VCDX, as since we're here at VMware, and I know how many VCDX
People just shaking their head at you in the audience right now.
Put a bungalow of that.
Okay, so it's somebody, picture it's your standard run-of-the-mill admin that's been at the same company for the last 10 years. They've been just chugging along, that they're running their infrastructure. They may have gone in and out of things in the cloud, have some stuff SaaS, some stuff local on it. Is there...
And they're going to be looking for a new job in 6 months because they're going to be made redundant from the job that they've had for the last 10 years.
So what can they do in the next 6 months to try to help them in the next 3 to 5 years?
That would be.
If you say that depends.
I teach awesome AWS training courses. Go on some of those. That's going to help
So
me at the very least.
go follow some of your okay.
I mean, okay.
Good.
It depends per person, right? It's not the same for everybody, but broaden your horizon, broaden everything that you are. Just follow the trends and make sure you're in it. And I think it's different for everybody. It's not.
Yes. Yeah, so I'm doing a similar presentation this week, kind of related to this subject, but it's about, your baseline infrastructure, right? You know how it runs, you know its peaks, you know its averages. You apply that same philosophy to yourself. So you just know this is me, these are kind of all the things I'm good at, these are the things I'm not really good at, and this is the way technology is moving, automation, cloud. So where can I pivot myself, come out of my comfort zone, and just strike that right balance to move in the direction that the way technology and business is moving? It's just, you've got to write down things, you've got to write down goals. So you could say a year from now, this is where I want to be.
So set your goals.
Yeah.
Actually set.
It's really, really important,
so you can go work towards.
because you just put it in your head, and next week something else comes out in the register, and you've made up your mind on something else. But just because you've seen a news article, or you've seen something on social media. So
Then you like to see levels who's on the golf course.
yeah.
I was going to say in the next 6 months, take a vacation.
Well,
Yeah.
It was really where I was going to say, because I don't think people, especially in our industry, tend to actually step away and do that enough to be able to recharge their batteries to do the next few years. So, well, awesome. We'll wrap this one up. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, guys. Thank you guys for coming and paying attention, and give us a couple minutes to switch over, and we'll jump to the next panel.